past month. So welcome to everyone. And again, many thanks for making time to join us. And today is such a special session because it's going to be facilitated by fellow students. As I think we said when this program started, that we want to make the learning as participatory as possible. So today we'll have some insights from actually 4 of your fellow students. And the next sessions in August, though, we are going to be having guest presenters. Next week, we'll have Dr. Evelyn Wesangula from Ministry of Health in Kenya joining us, together with also Dr. Murphy from React Africa. And then the following session where we look at One Health, we are going to have Dr. Emmanuel Cabali from FAO in Rome, Italy. He also come in as a guest. So we've got exciting sessions lined up for this month. So before I hand over to the students, I'll just quickly go through a very short presentation. Right, Daniel, please confirm you can see my screen.
Yeah, Julian, we can see a screen. Yeah, it's visible.
Good, thanks. So the first month of this program is over. Of course, we are still at the point where they are settling in. What happened was we had the baseline assessment. There's the Slack channel. I think the comments that I can give there is we want to make sure as we get into August, it even becomes more active as well, so that whatever official communication we have or some questions, because I have seen on the WhatsApp group, I'm rarely there, but sometimes I go here and there. I saw there are so many things, interesting posts that are coming through. So we also want to make sure that Slack also has these coming through. I think I bumped into one of the posts that was very interesting for a prescription that had so many drugs just this last week. And if we can share such things as well on Slack, it would help even someone joining in. It's easier to find the postings, the questions, the interactions, and all that are going through. So I would encourage you to use that more often. The WhatsApp group has really been active, and I'm sure a lot of you have been learning through your peer communication that you've been having there. So the last thing that was the main focus of the month is actually the online course, which it was a self-paced course where we're supposed to go through all the materials, which I hope most of you or all of you have actually concluded all the parts. And that's the reason for just a short summary that we'll have. The discussions will not end today. If we have any other questions, we want this to continue even as we invite the next guests and all. So maybe I can just briefly give you a recap. We are all aware that this is a course that was actually developed with by React in collaboration with Uppsala University in Sweden, and also funded by the European Institute of Innovation and Technology. And the course, I think you noticed, it's got a lot of videos, assignments to do, etc. And it's something that you can keep referring to back and forth, since you can do it at any time. And the objectives of the course really, which we hope by going through it, you were able to also, these objectives are something that were realized as you went through all the 4 parts of this course. The idea was to help whoever is going through the course understand antibiotic resistance and how much of a global threat it is currently, and how to take action in it. Then the second objective for actually this course is to learn about the mechanisms behind the emergence and spread of antibiotic resistance, and also to go through real life stories told by patients and all. I'm sure you interacted with those. And so understanding the challenges as well, preventative actions, not just the actions we take when we are looking for second line drugs, etc., but how can we best prevent this spread of this global health threat using a One Health approach, not only in human health, but also looking at animal and the environment, and also how to understand how it unfolds and also how it can be managed, controlled, and prevented in the society. So we went through different topics which are here. I won't dwell much into these, but I'll give the floor to our presenters who shed more light as the summary of what they took out from the 4 parts, because this course is divided into part 1 to 4. So today we are excited to have these 4 presenters that we are going to have. We've got the first one from Nigeria. We are going to hear from Oluwasten. Sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly, excuse me. Ajay from the Federal University of Agriculture in Nigeria. Then we'll also hear from Ignatius Kembe, Copperbelt University in Zambia. Ngube Mandela will share insights on part 3. He's from the University of Zimbabwe. And finally, Rogers Senyonjo from Busitema University in Uganda. So without wasting much time, I'll give the floor to them. Let me just stop sharing my screen to allow for our first presenter to be able to share their screen. And so as I mentioned, part 1 of the course will be, the summary is going to be given by Oluwasten Ajay. She's actually studying veterinary medicine and she's in a 6th year in Nigeria at Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta. So over to you, Oluwasten. I think you will have to give us a shorter version of how we pronounce your name. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Julian. Good morning, my colleagues all across Africa. Can you all hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes,
Thank
you
you.
are clear. Yes.
All right, thank you. Okay, Julian, the pronunciation of my name is Oluwatosin. It is a Yoruba name from Nigeria. I hope you get it better next time. Thank you. Good morning, my colleagues all across Africa. Oluwatosin Tolulope Ajayi is my name. I'm a final year veterinary medical student from the Federal University of Agriculture, Abeokuta, Nigeria. I'll be presenting the first part of our course, Antibiotic Resistance, the Silent Tsunami. Here are my outlines. I'll talk about the discovery of antibiotics, the burden of antibiotic resistance, the importance of surveillance, and then we'll talk about how we can address antimicrobial resistance. The discovery of antibiotics. Alexander Fleming in 1928, September 28, accidentally discovered a mold that resulted in the death of Staphylococcus aureus in his laboratory at St. Mary's Hospital in London. And then he concluded that the mold was producing antibacterial agents that might be employed to combat infectious diseases and not just Staphylococcus aureus. And then he went on to name it penicillin. In 1939, Howard Florey and Ernest Chain, they were able to successfully isolate the active substance that was in penicillin, and they tested it on mice. Later that year, in 1941, penicillin was ready to be used in humans. And that's in that 1941, among the first set of people to be treated with penicillin was a policeman, a British policeman named Albert Alexander. In 5 days, his infection started healing, although he eventually died because of the fact that there was not enough pure penicillin to complete his treatment. So that led to his death. Later that same 1941, Florey and Chain, they were able to do mass production. And then we got into what we call the antibiotic era. Later in 1945, Fleming, Florey, and Chain, they were awarded the Nobel Prize. And during the Nobel Award, Fleming gave a warning about the possibility of the development of penicillin resistance. He informed the people how that penicillin could, numerous bacteria could become resistant to penicillin, the newly discovered antibiotic, if it was not well used. Then fast forward to 1941, which was 2 years after his warning, the first case of penicillin resistance was observed. 1950 to 1960 was referred to as the golden age of antibiotic discovery. And that was due to the fact that about more than 1.5 of the antibiotics that we use today, they were discovered within that period. Unfortunately, we began to misuse antibiotic. Of course, prior to that, the discovery of antibiotics resulted in high rates of successful treatment of infectious diseases. And for instance, the successful treatment of bacterial pneumonia rose from 20% to 85% between 1937 to 1964. But as a result of continuous misuse of antibiotics, there was emergence and spread of antibiotic resistance. And then there was development of multi-drug strains. And then if we don't combat this, if we don't do something about it, we might end up getting into the post-antibiotic era. The burden of antibiotic resistance. The implication of antibiotic resistance is not just about the health factor, even though it is a very crucial one, but it's also cuts across the economy too. There is economic burden of antibiotic resistance, not just nationally, but even globally. The successful treatment of antimicrobial resistance infection is very costly. For instance, it was researched that to successfully treat an antimicrobial resistant infection, it will cost over a year's salary of a rural male worker in India. And you will agree with me that that is really a lot, a whole lot. So, and even the World Bank, they projected that 24 more people will be pushed into extreme poverty by 2030, and 1.1 to 3.8% fall in global gross domestic products might be experienced by 2050 if antimicrobial resistance is not put in check. And then let's talk about the health burden of antibiotic resistance. Should we start with the mortality, the high mortality that occurs as a result of antibiotic resistance? For instance, in Europe from 2015, it was reported that 33,000 mortality occur as a result of antibiotic resistance per year. And even in the United States, over 35,000 mortality have been reported per year as a result of antibiotic resistance. If you agree with me that that is a whole lot. And the concern is, if we have this number of reported cases in developed countries, what happens in low and middle income countries? Let's talk about my country, Nigeria, for instance, where there is little or no record of antibiotic resistance. What happens in other low-income countries, other middle-income countries, where there is no record? If we can have that amount of, that high amount of figure in developed countries. So you will agree with me that it is really a silent tsunami, and we really need to rise up to it. The social burden too, the social burden of antibiotic resistance. Talk about the frustration that patients experience while when infected with antibiotic resistance, the long period of time they will have to stay in the hospital, the frustration, the time that would be wasted, and all of that, inability to go to work, the emotional stress on the family members and loved ones. You will agree with me that it is sincerely not a pleasant experience to go through. And now, let's also talk about the increased spread of nosocomial infections among the health workers. That is not really something that is so nice, because even the health workers are at risk of nosocomial infections of resistant bacteria. So it is really something that we need to tackle. It is really something that we have to work on. Unfortunately, there is scarce antibiotic resistance data in low and middle income countries, and that is due to a number of factors. For instance, poor diagnostic facilities. A lot of low and middle income countries have very poor diagnostic facilities. You can hardly be able to tell the correct cause of mortality because of complicating factors, you know. So it is really, so we cannot get the accurate estimation of antimicrobial resistant cases. Another thing is the level of expertise. A lot of medical people, let's say medical students, for instance, want to travel abroad immediately after their studies, because it is generally known that in low and middle income countries, professionals are not valued. They are not well paid. Everybody wants greener pasture. Everybody wants to be treated right. So every medical student wants to travel abroad immediately after their studies, because our local environment is not encouraging enough. I want to leave Nigeria, for instance, immediately after my degree. I want to go abroad for my postgraduate studies and even to practice, because professionals are not well paid in my dear country. And I know that this cuts across a lot other middle and low income countries too. So now tell me, who will provide data when the issue of concern? Now, let's talk about the slow-moving pandemic and the silent tsunami, antibiotic resistance. It is actually worse now. It is actually worse now because of the globalization and international trade. Somebody can wake up in Nigeria and before the end of the day, find himself or herself in the United Kingdom. And you will know that when a person leaves a place to another, such person goes with the problems, such person goes with even the incubating infections. So we have people spreading infection from one country to another, from one state to another, from one border to another. And this results in development of resistant bacteria. So you will agree with me that antibiotic resistance is actually a slow moving pandemic waiting to happen if we don't do something about it. Let's take COVID-19, for instance. A lot of countries are on lockdown. A lot of people cannot work. We have more people in the hospitals who are sick. A lot of mortalities have been recorded because much attention was not paid to it when it was supposed to. And now we are talking about viral disease. What happens when we get to if we eventually get into post-antibiotic era? We all know that antibiotics are also engaged in the treatment of viral diseases to prevent secondary bacterial infection. So when that almighty resource, that almighty antibiotic becomes useless, becomes ineffective, what happens? What will be the state of our people? What will be the state of our animals? What will be the state of our environment? That means we might end up having more people die from, say, even secondary bacterial infection than from even the viral disease. So sincerely, my colleagues, it is really a slow-moving pandemic and a silent tsunami that we have to prevent from happening. There is an ongoing initiatives generating body data called the Global Antimicrobial Resistance Surveillance System, GLASS. It was developed by the World Health Organization in 2015. GLASS collects harmonized data on antimicrobial resistance occurrence from 8 bacterial pathogens, which include Escherichia coli, Klebsiella pneumoniae, Acinetobacter species, Staphylococcus aureus, Streptococcus pneumoniae, Salmonella species, Shigella species, and Neisseria gonorrhoeae. And these pathogens are isolated from 4 samples: the blood, the urine, the stool, and the genital swab. In 2020, Master Protocol for Estimating Attributable Mortality of Antimicrobial Resistance Bloodstream Infection was also published as part of the GLASS framework. Now, talking about the global burden estimate. Presently, we sincerely don't have sufficient data to know the global burden of antibiotic resistance at the moment. And it is very important that we do, because knowing the extent of antimicrobial resistance in our various countries and even globally will help in communicating the urgency of this crisis. It will help inform policies. It will create general awareness and also cases for antimicrobial resistance, as well as increase accountability and monitoring of the progress of antimicrobial response. Like I explained earlier, GLASS was launched by World Health Organization to meet the need for surveillance. However, the major drawback of surveillance system is it requires laboratory capacity to screen hundreds of bacteria with standardized methods on a regular basis. Hence, many low-income countries have very few surveillance sites. Now, how do we address antimicrobial resistance? My first advice on how we can address antimicrobial resistance is One Health approach. We know that antimicrobial resistance is an issue that concerns everyone. It cannot be tackled by just the human medics. It cannot be tackled by just the veterinarians. It cannot be tackled by just the environmental scientists. We really need all hands on deck to tackle antimicrobial resistance. I cannot just stay in Nigeria here and say I'm tackling antimicrobial resistance without working with other professionals in order to do so. So we need a One Health approach. And that is why I'm actually glad about this platform, the platform that brings a lot of us together from different countries. Then we can put our heads together, we can work together as one to tackle this slow-moving pandemic. Another way we can address antimicrobial resistance is general awareness. This is really, really very important. We need to let the people know. We need to let our environment know. As a veterinarian, I need to let my clients know, the farmers on the farm that indiscriminately utilize antibiotics because they probably cannot afford a veterinarian or because they cannot easily get access, like the farmers in the rural environment, for instance. They just purchase antibiotics and they just use without knowing the indication, without knowing the right dosage. So we need to let them know. As students in our various countries, one of the ways we can do this is by having antimicrobial resistance awareness club. We can organize our colleagues, we can put ourselves together, and even some of our lecturers, for those of us that are in school, and for those that are already practicing, we can put our colleagues together. We can organize antimicrobial resistance awareness club where we enlighten ourselves, where we enlighten the people about antimicrobial resistance. Another way we can do that is utilizing World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, which is on the 18th to 24th of November. For myself as a veterinarian, for instance, 28th of September every year is World Rabies Day. On World Rabies Day, what we do is we go all out. We enlighten the people about rabies. We do free vaccination for their dogs, for their cats. We enlighten them on how to prevent rabies. We enlighten them about anti-rabies vaccination schedule and all of that. If we can do the same for antimicrobial resistance, it will really go a long way. You know, the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, we go all out, we enlighten the people, we make them know. We will get more results that way. And of course, the awareness continues, not just restricted to World Antimicrobial Awareness Week. We meet people on daily basis. We interact with clients on daily basis. Even our family members and the people in our local environment, a lot of them use antibiotics indiscriminately. We can enlighten them. General awareness. Another way we can tackle antimicrobial resistance is antimicrobial stewardship. Responsible and judicious use of antibiotics, even as professionals. A lot of medical people, a lot of veterinarians, a lot of human medics, even pharmacists and nurses, a lot of professionals use antibiotics indiscriminately. You know, prescription of antibiotics without even attempting to carry out antimicrobial susceptibility tests, that may not be good enough. And then when we try oxytetracycline and we see that it is not working, okay, we say, okay, that did not work, okay, try enrofloxacin. No. When it starts with us, if we can utilize antibiotics correctly and judiciously, we will get more results and we will be good examples to the people around us. Hygiene too cannot be overemphasized. When there is hygiene, there is lesser risk of infection. And then advocacy. For those of us who are students, let's join the people, let's engage in our local association. Let's be active. Let's be advocate of antimicrobial resistance. Let's let the people know. And that's the way we can get to influence policy making. And another thing we can also do to address antimicrobial resistance is research studies. For myself, for instance, my undergraduate project, I'm working on antimicrobial prescription pattern at the veterinary teaching hospital of my institution. So we can also engage in research, and this will also help in addressing antimicrobial resistance in our local environment and even also work with other professionals, not restricting ourselves to our local environment. Professor Otto has said, and I quote, "We have failed to preserve this resource, antibiotics, and we have also failed to renew it. If we are unlucky, the world might fall into something called post-antibiotic era. To counteract that, all of society, individuals, societies, governments, and even the private sector need to collaborate to prevent this from happening. We need to come back to balance." Thank you very much for listening. Good morning, everybody.
Wow, wow, wow. I think I'll ask us to unmute just for a second or so that we give a very big round of applause to, I actually feel like saying Dr. Ajayi already. So can we just give a round of applause, please? Thank you so much for that excellent presentation that was loaded with a lot of valuable insights into the first part of that course. I think it's good that we are recording this session because she talked about the discovery of antibiotics. She told about the golden age, how this is really a silent tsunami. She went on to even link it to the current COVID-19 pandemic, how the One Health approach is important. And the call to action really was very, very touching for me because it's a passionate thing that if before you even graduate, at least you know the importance of antimicrobial stewardship, the importance of using the antibiotics, not using them indiscriminately. And I think we'll get to a better age where we have better professionals who take responsibility, who raise awareness. So thank you so much for that very elaborate and well-detailed presentation. Our next presenter now, we are going to Southern Africa. We have come from Nigeria now to Southern Africa. And I'll call upon our next presenter, who's Ignatius. Ignatius Kembe, I hope now I've pronounced the name correctly, is from Copperbelt University, and he's doing his bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery, and he's in his fifth year. I'll share the screen from my end, and over to you, Ignatius. And just before you start, I just want to say that if you have any questions or any comments, please feel free to put them in the chat. We'll look at them right at the end of all the 4 presentations. So over to you, Ignatius.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Ignatius. We can hear you loud and clear. Thank you.
Okay, good morning, colleagues. Hope you're doing very well. Well, I should say,
Looks like you're breaking, Ignatius. Maybe just check your network connection again. We cannot
it was
hear
a
you
very
now.
wonderful presentation from my previous speaker. I'll be taking you.
Hi, Ignatius. It looks like he's having network challenges. Daniel, confirm if you can hear him from your end.
No, I can hear Ignatius. Maybe Julia, we can
Hi, Ignatius, if you can hear us, just try again your connection. If you're still having challenges, we can move on to part 3 and then come back to you.
Yeah,
it looks like he cannot hear us. We also cannot hear Daniel clearly. Yeah. So I think let us, we'll just give him a few minutes as we go to part 3 as he sorts out his internet issues. So as we wait for our Zambian colleague to come through, I'll hand over the floor now to Mandela Ngube. Mandela Ngube is from the University of Zimbabwe, and he's doing his bachelor's degree in medicine and surgery, and he's in his 5th year. So Mandela, I hope your network is okay and you can hear us. Over to you.
Yes, good morning. Can you co-host me? I can't share my screen.
Oh, okay. Let me do that. I think you should be able to now.
All right. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it and we can hear you. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, Julian. Good morning, Daniel. Good morning, colleagues. I hope you doing very well. So I think I said earlier on, my name is Mandela Ncube. So the surname is Ncube there. That's a Ndebele name. I'm doing the Bachelor of Medicine and Bachelor of Surgery degrees, fifth year at the University of Zimbabwe, which of course is in Zimbabwe. So I'm going to be taking you through a review of part 3, which was innovation of antibiotics and the dilemma of access and access. Okay, so the outline of a presentation, I'm going to look at the discovery void, where we're going to discuss about when the last time the antibiotics were discovered up to present, what has been termed the discovery void, which basically looks at the problem between science and economics. Whilst we are pushing to try and develop antibiotics, but there are other economical drawbacks and also scientific drawbacks, which we'll discuss. And then we'll look at the alternatives to antibiotics as studied, and maybe some new business models that are being proposed to try and address the issue of antibiotic resistance, and also how many are trying to secure access while reducing excess. And then I'll just give what I got from the course in the past month, which will be our call to action. So I think, can you see that diagram clearly there?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, so that's, I found this one to be much more clearer. There was one that was shared in our course. I just looked for this one, I found it much more clear. So basically what we refer to as the discovery void begins after the year 1980, which is about 1987 up to present, where there haven't been any antibiotics discovered. And we'll see why that has happened. So you realize that when antibiotics were first discovered, actually resistance existed from that time of discovery. But as resistance progressed, it was balanced by innovation. So when resistance will emerge, new antibiotics will be innovated. So a new antibiotic meant that the mechanism of action of the antibiotic or its target molecules within the bacteria that it was attacking was different. So that allowed innovation to happen. But as time went on, the mechanism of action was sort of like exhausted in a way that innovation ended up slowing down, but consumption was increasing because infections continuously increased. So it meant that people that needed antibiotics increased. So that led to increased consumption, but innovation was slow. So that was now making sure that antibiotic resistance was now an emerging crisis, especially our gram-negative bacteria. Those are the ones of particular concern. That's your Pseudomonas, your Klebsiella, and your Escherichia coli, and many other bacteria in the gram-negative classes, because they are more resistant to most of the antibiotics. So this led to increased treatment failure, mortality, and cost. So it actually became a problem locally, globally. Generally, it was now a very big problem because with treatment failures and mortality and all the costs that were being incurred because of that resistance. So as I said later on, the discovery of void was from 1987. All those things were like becoming worse up to now. So the reason why we are now trying to take action is because the extent to which we are failing or to which treatment failure is occurring and the mortality rates and the costs are eventually going to crash us out, and it will make life difficult. That is why we have to take action before the situation really overwhelms us. So the science and economics part of it, it is said that it takes about 1 billion euros and 15 years to bring an antibiotic into the market, which is quite a significant amount of money and quite a significant time. So as you can look at that, if you can analyze that statement of 1 billion euros in 15 years to bring an antibiotic into market, it means that it takes high investment, but there is going to be low profits. Why? Because there's going to be low use of antibiotics because resistance quickly develops, and then there's going to be a short treatment period of patients because after a few weeks, most antibiotics, there'll be resistance, or actually the recommended treatment period is actually some days to weeks. So it means that even if a company invested 1 billion euros for 15 years, their returns are very low. And at the same time, also have drug toxicity. You know, you are limited to what molecules you can use to make antibiotics because some of them actually are toxic to the body. So we're trying to avoid using them, which becomes a limiting factor to how much we can innovate. And the new drugs, take for example, if you're going to have some new drugs that you're going to develop, which are able to deal with drug resistance microorganisms, we will reserve those for the drug resistance microorganisms. We will not use them on the daily staphylococcal infections or less resistant infections. So it means less sales for the company. So if I owned a pharmaceutical company and I invested 1 billion euros and I took 15 years to bring an antibiotic into market, what it means is that for a considerable amount of time, that antibiotic may not be used actually, or it actually be sold less, because what the medical practitioners are trying to do is they're going to reduce resistance by not using much of it. So it means I'm not going to sell much. So now this is going to remove the incentive of innovation. So it means I'll not have the incentive to feel like I should actually engage in innovation because it's not profitable to me. So I think that cartoon there is actually showing how instead of us successfully defeating the bacteria, the conversation between these two folks here is that the antibiotics are actually feeding the bacteria instead. So, which is actually a dilemma that we have. I think I like the way it is depicted there. Now, I took this out of one of the EU websites. It talks about a package of incentives which is needed to attract R&D investment into new solutions against antimicrobial resistance. So if you read across those three columns there, you realize that we have push mechanisms, novel pull mechanisms, and reimbursement and HTA reform. So basically what we're trying to do is how can we encourage involvement of pharmaceutical companies, independent organizations, the government, and any other organizations to come in and help us in terms of discovering new antibiotics or trying to find a better way of making the available ones effective, or what can be done to come up with solutions to get people engaged. So we're looking at that. If we can reduce the risk of high investments, it will be better. You know, I will talk more about those new business models. So basically that was what we're trying to do. If you read through the course, the idea is how can we reduce the risk of high investments? Because people do not want to invest into antimicrobial resistance because there's less return now. So we're trying to find ways, how can you reduce that risk, or how can we share that risk, and how can we share the effort? And how can we encourage them to actually engage? Some were thinking that if we maybe give, let's say, some awards or some rewards to people that actually are involved in innovation or people that are involved in coming up with solutions, this will be an incentive to maybe try and make them get engaged. So you will have the slides, I'm sure you'll be able to read that table there depicted. And then, so what is being tried to be depicted here is what I understood as the concept of private-public partnerships, where the public institutions, maybe the government institutions, partner with private companies so that they share the effort, they share the risk, and they increase the returns in a way. And so there are some organizations or some movements and some plans that have been instituted in, for example, the new drugs for bed bugs and the European gram-negative antibacterial engine. So if you research on these and read on them, they are basically trying to form institutions where they can try and realize what are they discovering, and they're trying to come up with plans of what other drugs can we use against the antibacterial, which are gram-negative. Remember at the beginning, I really did share that we have a bigger problem from our gram-negative bacteria. So that's what enables looking at a new drug for bed bugs. If you actually read on the article there, which we have in our course, it expands a lot on what they have done. Quite a lot of complicated information, but you can read through it and understand it. It's a glimpse and appreciate the existence of such a movement. And then the alternatives to antibiotics, it's been a struggle actually. From what I was realizing, I think it's been a struggle because initially, for example, they used to take the serum from immune individuals. So if you are infected, your body produces antibiotics against the infection. So it used to happen that if someone is infected with the same infection that another person got, they will just go and collect the serum from one individual who's now immune. So they now contain antibodies, and they will try and inject it in the next person. But there are a lot of toxic side effects because of reactions between the serum and antibodies and other antigens, which may cause reactions. It was quite very toxic. Today, they're trying the same thing under antibody therapy, where now they try and instead of taking the whole serum, they extract the antibody. don't mind the science too much, but just understand that they're trying to take the very active ingredients which can fight the bacteria. But the problem is that is not fast enough for a rapid response. That's what that's all meant. So it still shows that one way or the other, humanity will need antibiotics. So we still have a mandate to save the antibiotics. But we know that plants and animals, they actually produce some antimicrobial peptides, right? But we're trying to, there's a lot of study that's, according to what I read in the course, that a lot of study is still happening and a lot of evaluation is trying to come through to say, how can we utilize those in terms of treatment of bacterial and other microbial infections and bacteriophages. So these are basically viruses which infect bacteria. How can they be used? All these things are being evaluated and trying to find out how they can be of use. Now, there's an HK Allen who said something that I found to be interesting as I was going through the research for this presentation. He says, solutions to the antibiotic resistance problem are multifaceted. I think the first presenter, she really did highlight how everyone has to get involved in all factors and all sectors and all. It needs a One Health approach, and this cannot be overemphasized. And it includes the reducing the use of antibiotics via the use of alternative products. So he was encouraging, or they were encouraging, the use of alternatives to antibiotics in terms of trying to save the antibiotics we have. So he says no one alternative will replace all the uses of antibiotics. So there's not going to be a one solution, but we will need to use the One Health approach. Think of everything that we can possibly innovate and try and see what role it can play. So the issue about new business models, let me just look at the economic burden. The new business models are trying to address the problem of the economic burden in terms of the treatment failure, because if treatment failure comes, it comes after a long time. And it's actually a problem, even the patient, because the patient is actually, he has the input into the economy of the family, the economy of the country, the economy of the region. So we're losing people because of treatment failure. We're treating people for too long, and that's actually an economic burden. And then we have also the issue of expensive drugs. Most of the drugs which are able to deal with the drug resistance microorganisms, they're very expensive. So that ups the economic burden that was highlighted there. And then hospitalization for longer periods is highlighted later on, is also an economic burden. The hospital itself has to try and deal with the same patient, not focusing on other patients because the bed is occupied. And even the patient themselves, they have to be making payments daily for being in the hospital. So it's an economic burden. And then mortality there is highlighted later on. Excessive mortality is a loss it's a loss to the country and to the globe. We wouldn't really want to lose a lot of people because we need that workforce. Especially last time, one of our launches, we did share that Africa is a country which is a region which is sort of like, it's labor intensive. It's most of its economic model is labor intensive. So if we lose a lot of people, it means we're reducing down our productivity, and that is affecting our economy. But now, if we think of solving this by restricting use, it means there'll be low profits to the companies, as I said later on, and there'll be low financial incentives. What if we increase the pricing? If we increase prices now, we are going to reduce access. So this new business model idea is trying to come up with ideas which can make sure that we are able to get antibiotics, at the same time reduce access, but making sure there's adequate access. So that is the dilemma where we are in, because we cannot increase pricing. If we increase prices, there'll be reduced access, because there's a difference between availability and access. So an antibiotic can be present and available in the market, but if people cannot buy it, then it is not accessible. So we have to understand that dilemma which we have. So what are the potential solutions now? Public-private partnerships. So in a sentence, public-private partnerships, according to my understanding, was, for an example, a government can partner with a private pharmaceutical company to give some of the taxpayers' money into an investment that the private company is undertaking in antibiotic innovation. So instead of paying maybe 15 euros for 15 years, they may pay 8 million euros, and the other 8 million will probably be subsidized, or some sort of financial plan is worked out. And then new business models basically have to address the issue of innovation, conservation, and access, as I was trying to highlight later on. So some of the measures that have been taken include the Global Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance. The fact that the World Health Organization has actually taken an interest in Global Action Plan on antimicrobial resistance is one of the public-private partnerships whereby they are coming in to try and fund, to try and give ideas, to kind of be part of the research. And also we have national action plans for combating antibacterial resistance. So all these, if you read about them, their main solutions they're bringing in are trying to address the whole issue of innovation, conservation, and access, at the same time preserving the economic balance within the countries, because there are many other issues which need attention more than just the antibacterial. So there was a video that was in the course there, which also explained some core ideas in the new business models. So the first one talked about delinkage. So basically delinkage is when you separate sales and profits. For example, if you had a product, which in this case, they're going to be antibiotics, you could sell your antibiotics and still from your sales, not be the place where you get your profits. But so that, for example, you can sell antibiotics at €5, even though the antibiotic costs about €6 or €7 in general. But your profit is going to come from different sectors. For example, it can come through rewards, it can come through reimbursement or subcontracted by the government or other participating NGOs or any other companies that are subcontracting. So it means you don't need to make your antibiotic expensive because your profit does not come from your sales. That is delinkage. And then there's cooperation. So cooperation now involves even public institutions. For example, universities. Universities can work together with the government, they can work together with public-private companies, they can work together with private companies. So the fact that there will be many or multiple stakeholders, there is effort sharing, then there is risk sharing. So which was actually a good approach that I found very interesting. And also we need a systematic approach where everything is actually taken into consideration. As you are going to put in regulations, you also improve access. So everything has to be meshed. There has to be matching interventions. There shouldn't be one arm which is focused on at the expense of the other, according to what I understood there. Okay, and then so securing access while reducing excess. So basically what this was trying to say is that a lack of access can actually be a bigger problem than the excess, than the excess. Instead of resistance, a lack of access can be a bigger problem if we're not really careful. So quality controlled drugs, as these are needed, we have to make sure that they are available to people, and we need trained health providers to make sure that they are going to monitor all this and be able to deliver quality health care, to be able to give us an assessment. So effective management and treatment of infections is part of these things. Can people access quality controlled drugs? Can they access trained health providers? Can they access effective management and treatment of infections? And can they do they have access to good diagnostic and microbiological capacity? All these are problems in low and middle income countries. So it becomes a debate of how are we focusing on access when actually there's a problem of access, which is a much more primary problem than access. So we have to make sure that all this is set in, then we play our role in dealing with antimicrobial resistance. So my call to action will be, I'll first read a quotation that I had from Professor S.S. Peterson in one of the videos which was shared. He said that many needs but don't get, and many get but don't need, which has been a problem for centuries in basically every part of our life as Africans and every part of our lives as humans across the globe. But in terms of antibiotic resistance, this should really ring a bell on us. Many need but don't get, many get but don't need. So that is basically a summary of the problem of antimicrobial resistance. What I wish all of us can understand is that we have all played a role, directly or indirectly. Sometimes we played a role without knowledge, in ignorance. Sometimes it's deliberate. Sometimes it was out of desperate measures. As it is happening right now with coronavirus, some of the measurements to treat the virus, it is desperation because we have not really known yet how to deal with the severe cases. So people are being forced to overprescribe medications, which may give us problems in the coming years. So each of us should take themselves as responsible and personalize the problem. I think if we do that, we'll be able to then see within the space where you are, what measures can you take to leave the space different from how you found it. So that was basically the main message that I got from there. I hope that was clear and you were able to get what I was summarizing. And I hope I kept my time. I was afraid my slides were going to be too much, but thank you so much.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you. This deserves another round of applause for a few seconds. Can we just give a Very big round of applause to our colleague. As I said, here I'm going to be calling everyone Dr. Nube. That was really an excellent presentation. And right from looking at the discovery void of antibiotics, you looked at the issues of the economic burden, how it has not become profitable for some pharmaceutical companies to be producing antibiotics, and what is our role in attracting R&D investment. You talked about the issues of challenges of access versus excess, which in low and middle income countries, I'm sure you can agree that the problems of access can actually be even worse than the excess, looking at the diagnostic problems, the microbiological capacity, etc. So thank you so much. As I said before, I think I'm glad that we are recording these presentations, because they'll be you have shed light on a number of very useful and informative areas from the course as well. And I particularly also liked your call to action. Indeed, we all have played a role. We are playing a role in actually aggravating this problem of antimicrobial resistance. So the sooner we personalize it, the better. So thanks for that. I'll move on to, I'll try to go back to Ignatius. I don't know whether, Ignatius, if you can hear me, can you confirm whether your internet is now okay? Ignatius?
I can get you. I can get you.
So I think now we can go to your presentation. So over to you.
Good morning once again. Are you able to get?
Yes, I could hear you for a minute. Hope you remain audible. You can go ahead.
Thank you very much. Sorry about the network. It has been cut in. I think we're having network issue.
All right. Looks like there are serious network problems in Zambia. I don't know whether it's because the elections are there next week or it's something else. I think we can move on to part 4 as we. Hi, Ignatius. It looks like the network is really bad. So I would suggest we move to part 4. We try one last time. If we cannot, then of course we'll share the slides, and also you can also share a recording later, because this is a very good presentation also that we're looking forward to hearing today. So we move on to our other presenter, who is going to take us through part 4. And now we are coming to East Africa, where we'll have, I hope I'll be able to pronounce the name as well. I'm having issues with pronouncing names today. But anyway, Rogers Senyonjo from Uganda. He's actually a Bachelor of Medicine and Surgery. It looks like Bachelor of Medicine students were the ones who submitted their request to present first, because we just used the first we selected the first ones that opted to do this. He's from Busi Tema University in Uganda, and currently in his 5th year. So over to you, Rogers, to offer us a summary of what you got from part 4 of the online course. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Julian. Please confirm that you can hear me.
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes, you are clear. All right, thank you very much. First of all, the pronunciation was really on point. Rogers Senyonjo is my name, and I'm from Bustema University. So good morning, everyone. I'll be presenting or taking us through part 4. That is my first slide, where I'll be taking us through the challenges and opportunities for the future. Like Julian has introduced me, I'm Senyo Rogers from Bustema University, Faculty of Health Sciences. I'm doing my bachelor's in medicine and surgery in my final year. Yes, so I would like to thank Ajay and Mandela for the presentation so far. They have highlighted a number of things right from the discovery of antibiotics up to where we are right now. And they have really given us a clear picture of the burden that we are having due to antimicrobial resistance, the global burden, the burden on the health care system, the economic burden, and about the business models that Mandela has taken us through. And that was really a very nice presentation. So I'm just going to briefly give my presentation. It will be very brief. Hopefully I will manage my time. And I would like to state that antimicrobial resistance is really a global problem. It's a complex and requires complex solutions. The WHO has listed antimicrobial resistance among the top global health threats, and this is something that has knows no borders.
Sorry, Rogers, sorry to disturb you. If you can just do the slideshow so that we can be able to follow the print. Yeah, if it's larger, yeah, thank you, excellent.
Is it clear now? All right.
Yes, much better.
Yeah, so I was saying the WHO has listed antimicrobial resistance among the top global health threats, and it's a complex problem that requires complex solutions because the resistant bacteria knows no border and they can affect anyone in any country. So there is really a need to have the international and multi-stakeholder collaboration in order to address this challenge. Nothing can be done if you're going to do it alone, but through collaboration and partnerships, that's the only way we can be able to address this challenge. This challenge is more common, like we've seen already from the previous presentations, in the low and middle income countries. Those are the ones that are generally more affected than the developed countries. And basically, there are a number of various reasons. I just try to highlight a few here, but there is really poor access to health services in these low and middle income countries. And the diagnostics, most of the treatment is done clinically, and most times these prescriptions are done by unqualified people in these countries. And then there is a lot of infections that are happening in these low and middle income countries. You realize that in developed countries, most of the disease burden right now is on the non-communicable diseases. But in our countries, in Africa and other continents where we have low and middle income countries, the disease burden is still more in the infectious diseases, and this is basically due to the poor sanitation conditions, lack of clean water, among many other things. And then there is uncontrolled use of antibiotics in low and middle income countries. So there are a number of global initiatives that have come on board to help in fight against antimicrobial resistance. Basically, antimicrobial resistance right now, regardless of the challenges, it is widely recognized as a major threat to global health. And this has really woken up people to see the need to work together to find sustainable solutions. So of recent, in the past 15 years, about 15 years, we've seen an increase in the political commitment to address the antibiotic resistance. We all know the Sustainable Development Goals. In 2019, SDG 3, which mainly focuses on health, was remodified to include a component that really addresses or seeks to address antimicrobial resistance, whereby it is now 3D2, which states that to reduce the percentage of bloodstream infections due to selected antimicrobial resistant organisms. Yes, so in 2015, we saw a number of global actions coming on board, with the most popular one being the one from the WHO, but a number of other organizations like the Food and the Agriculture Organization of United Nations. I remember we had a representative in our launching ceremony. World Organization for Animal Health. They have come up with global action plans on antimicrobial resistance, and many countries or many nations are now adopting the Global Action Plan on Antimicrobial Resistance from WHO to make their own national action plans, which really seek to address this challenge. And in 2016, we saw a United Nations General Assembly, whereby the heads of states gathered together and they signed a political declaration. Like, they made a commitment to addressing antimicrobial resistance through a broad multi-sectorial approach. And here is to really contribute to the development of new antibiotics, research, innovation, alternative medicines, and financing. And then in the same year, the UN Secretary General convened an interagency coordination group meeting on antimicrobial resistance and tasked them to go and come up with the recommendations on how best we can be able to tackle this challenge. And they managed to submit their recommendations the year 2019 or April. So among the recommendations that were made, one was accelerating progress in countries. Here it is basically to accelerate the development of national action plans in all countries and to ensure their implementation. Because at that time, we really didn't have many being drafted, many being present in a number of countries. In Uganda, we just had our first national action plan in 2018, November, that's when it was launched. And I was blessed to be part of the conference, that launching event, which was hosted in Kampala at Hotel Africana. The second recommendation was innovating to secure for the future. This one is basically through the different means, like Mandela highlighted, discovery of new antimicrobials, diagnostics, vaccines, and then safe and effective alternatives. We saw a number of alternatives like phage therapy, where we use bacteriophages, antimicrobial monoclonal therapies, and new technologies like use of nanotechnologies in treatment of bacterial illnesses. The third recommendation was collaborating for more effective action. And here we are looking at systematic engagement of civil society and private sector, and to enhance their contribution towards addressing antimicrobial resistance. The governments alone without private sector engagement can't really address this challenge, because the private sector plays a very vital role in the health within countries and across the world. So, and they're the people who are able to invest in even more than some of the governments, so that we carry out the researches and innovations that we need. And then the fourth recommendation was investing for sustainable response through development of innovative approaches to mainstream antimicrobial resistance related activities, as well as to leverage resources like from existing funding systems, mobilize for new funding systems, and to ensure that funding is available for the antimicrobial resistance related activities. Then the fifth, or the last recommendation, was strengthening accountability and global governance. This is basically to build the momentum and political support that is sustainable, and to enable comprehensive monitoring of science and evidence to antimicrobial resistance, as well as ensuring accountability among all the stakeholders, that is the governments, the private sector, and all other key players. Yeah, so I wanted to highlight a few objectives from the global action or the global action plan on antimicrobial resistance by the WHO. The objective one is really understanding awareness or improving awareness and understanding of antimicrobial resistance through effective communication, education, and training. And we've seen a number of organizations coming on board to embrace this objective. We've seen a number of awareness campaigns taking place, with a famous one being the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week, which is usually from 18th to 24th November each year. Then the second objective was to strengthen the knowledge and evidence base through surveillance and research. Someone is unmute. If they could mute, I don't know who that one is. But the objective 3 was to reduce infection to reduce on the infection. Prevention is better than cure. So if we could reduce on the infection through effective sanitation, hygiene, and control measures within the hospitals and our communities, without infections, there will be no need for antibiotics, and hence there will be no antimicrobial resistance. But because of the prevailing circumstances in our countries, that's why we are able to have a rise in the antimicrobial resistance. And then optimize the use of antimicrobial medicines in human and animal health. When you go through all the 4 parts of this course, you realize that there is irrational use of medicines in both humans and animals. 50% of the antibiotics used in humans is actually unnecessary or it's uncalled for. And this is even worse when it comes to animals, whereby antibiotics are used uncontrollably and for things like promotion of growth of these animals, which is really a big trouble. And then the last objective was to develop the economic case for sustainable investment that takes into account the needs of all countries. I've already highlighted this about the new medicines, diagnostics, vaccines, among others. I'll just give you an example. So after this global action plan, a number of countries went ahead to draft the national action plans. I saw one for Nigeria, as if someone shared it on our WhatsApp group. And this is one for Uganda. I decided to give one for Uganda as an example, where it also adopted that of the WHO to come up with now specific or our own local objectives. And the one is to promote awareness, training, and education. I'm not going to talk more about this. I've already talked about it in the WHO. Then objective 2 is to improve infection prevention and control. Objective 3, stewardship, that is promote optimal access and use of antimicrobials. That is antimicrobial stewardship. And I highlighted much about it. Objective 4 is antimicrobial resistance surveillance. And then 5 is research and innovation. So the action plan is mainly focused on these. And these are the things that I've highlighted back. I'm not going to go much through them. But in surveillance and monitoring, basically here we need to see, we need to monitor the antibiotic use, the resistance levels and partners, the cost implications and health care resources. How is it affect? How are the antibiotics being used? What are the resistance levels? Which antimicrobials are resistant? Which bacteria, which microorganisms are resistant in given settings and in given regions? That can be really very helpful, especially when it comes to selecting which medicines or when it comes to drafting the guidelines for treatment. Cost implications on the healthcare resources. Then decrease the need for antibiotics. I've already talked about this. Prevention is key. Research and innovation, access and rational use, and then non-human usage in environment. This includes even that in livestock. So who is responsible? Whose responsibility is it for us to fight the antimicrobial resistance? My answer is everyone is responsible. This is not a challenge for the government. This is not a challenge for the private sector. This is a challenge for everyone. So we need everyone's engagement, right from our mothers and fathers and grandparents in the villages up to the presidents at the top of the countries. So we need the involvement of the academia. These are the people who are going to really spread the gospel, teach, and do a lot of work in regards to antimicrobial resistance. Then research, we need to do research. This is basic and advanced research. We need the basic research, for example, determining the patterns and the prevalence, the incidence, and the demographics and epidemiology of antimicrobial resistance. And then you need advanced research, which involves innovation and coming up with new technologies. Then healthcare systems. The healthcare systems are some of the key contributors to antimicrobial resistance. And we need to really raise awareness among health workers on how best we should optimize use of antimicrobials in the healthcare setting, and then the civil society and the communities as well. So when you look at the sides of the government, we need to it's a multi-sectorial approach, like I said, and we need to include all the sectors: Ministry of Health, Ministry of Agriculture, research, education, financing, and environment, and any other key players and stakeholders that are necessary in combating this problem. So what can I do? Me and you who are listening and the person out there, what can we do to help in this challenge? We might not be policymakers at this moment, but we can do something. So I'll start from the point of raising awareness. If you want to do something, what you start with is to learn more about antimicrobial resistance. Given the fact that you people, given the fact that we are on this course, that is really a very good start for us because we are learning about antimicrobial resistance. But the point is, after learning about this antimicrobial resistance, let's not just go and sit back and relax. Let's be ambassadors and champions. Let's go and teach others about antimicrobial resistance. Let's raise awareness so that we can promote behavior change, especially in the communities where we come from. Let's be examples. Talk about the really fatal effects of antimicrobial resistance, and talk about the available options. Not every illness can be treated by antibacterials. So this is what we need to go and talk about when we go back to our different communities. And then you need to stay healthy. And if you're healthy, you won't need antibiotics. If you don't need antibiotics, that means there won't be antimicrobial resistance. Let's practice those different hygiene practices. Let's wash our hands. Let's be mindful of what we eat. Prepare the food properly. Wash the fruits before you eat them. Get vaccinated. When you get vaccinated, that means your body will be sensitized and your immune system will be able to fight infections and do not spread the disease. If you're sick, try to stay at home if possible, and try to first get better. And then lastly is use antibiotics wisely. Most of us in this course are medical students or are in health-related fields. And we have one challenge whereby we think that we know it. So once you feel like you're sick, you just go and buy antibiotics, you just go and self-medicate. But do not self-medicate. Go and seek care from qualified personnel and then follow the treatment directions or guidelines. Make sure that you complete the doses. So what are some of the challenges that we are still having as regards to antimicrobial resistance, stewardship, and fight? I should say that we've seen an increasing level of awareness. However, it's not yet where it should be. Most of the awareness has been in tertiary institutions, has been in policymakers, has been in these people in like higher levels. But think about that person who is in the village who is not getting access to this information, and once they get a cough, they'll just go to the nearby drug shop and buy an antibiotic. These are the people where we need now to go and reach to and make sure that we raise awareness. So one of the challenges is that our awareness is not yet where it is supposed to be. There's still little public engagement, and this is basically what I've just talked about. The policies, the national action plans are on papers, but the implementation is not really yielding or is not yielding effective. And in some of the situations and in many settings, antimicrobial resistance is not yet considered as a crisis or a disease. So it is not given a priority, like in many settings. If it was like COVID, whereby the governments will all wake up and say, let's do this to mitigate the challenges we are facing today, the challenge of antimicrobial resistance, maybe would be somewhere far, but it's not yet considered as a crisis. This was mentioned by Professor Peterson's during the panel discussion that is highlighted. But if possible, if you've not yet seen that panel discussion, it is very vital one. Please go and just have a look on how those smart heads were discussing. There are very many weak health systems in the low and middle income countries. There's limited access to health services, a prescription by unqualified prescribers, and lack of diagnostics. You find that a government hospital, so in some cases, in some settings, the nearby government hospital or public hospital or public health center is really very, very many kilometers away from many people. So if someone is sick, even the energy, remember we are poor, even the transport, the energy, go to the hospital or to the health center, it really becomes a challenge, and people just opt to go and to the nearby drug shops where they do polypharmacy. I shared some a prescription in the WhatsApp group. I think many of you were able to see it, where the prescriber prescribed almost every antibiotic to the patient who had malaria as the diagnosis. Very, very absurd. Many people are still dying from lack of access to antibiotics than from the resistance. This is the question of access versus excess. And Mandela was able to highlight more about this. I realized that in many settings, there is too much access to antibiotics whereby everyone can just access them. Then in other settings, they are not there. People do need them like seriously, and they need them for a good cause. but they are not there. So we need to address this challenge as well. Then there are basic problems in low and middle income countries, like lack of clean water, sanitation, and education. I've talked about this before. I'm not going to spend more time on that. The pipeline of new antibiotics is nearly dry. It has taken years before we can see new antibiotics on board. And I think this is really one of the biggest challenges that we are facing right now, because developing a drug really takes a good number of years, more than 10 years, and we are not seeing any antibiotics on board, any new antibiotics on board. And if we get resistant to all the existing antibiotics, it is very absurd that we might end up with a post-biotic era that will claim very many lives. There are no alternative therapies that have been approved for clinical use. We've seen a number of them in research studies, the bacteriophage uses, the monoclonal antibodies, the use of nanotechnologies, but it is not yet approved for clinical use. There's still more need for research and the funding is limited. However, I've highlighted something here in red. We are trying to power new antibiotics in the system, which is already leaking, because there's already efforts that are being made to produce new antibiotics. But if we don't address the key challenges, the basic challenges I've talked about in the low and middle income countries, most likely, even those new antibiotics will face the resistance. What happens in 50 years from now? That's the question that all of us should think about. If we had time, I would make this more engaging, and we have a few inputs from people, but we don't have that time. So I'll just give what I think will happen in 50 years from now. If we don't develop sustainable plans and investments in curbing antimicrobial resistance, we are in a big trouble. The word trouble is in red. We're in a big trouble. A post-antibiotic era is coming. However, antimicrobial resistance has always been there with us. Right from the first time when these drugs were discovered, Ajay highlighted that during the discovery, antimicrobial resistance has always been there. And we should embrace the fact that it's never an unending game. They're going to still live with it. But what we need to do is just to create a balance between access and conservation of these antimicrobials. And if we are able to create that balance, that means in 50 years, we shall be somewhere where antimicrobial resistance is not a big worry or a big concern. And the only way we can be able to address this is if we give the best antibiotic to only those in need. And the word best, I don't mean the most superior or the most super antibiotic, because most of these antibiotics in the higher classes, they're very expensive with very severe side effects, and they're used as last resort. So the best antibiotic is that antibiotic which is effective with little side effects and little resistance partners. Then we need to improve on our diagnostics. If we could come up with diagnostics whereby we can do a rapid testing and confirm that this is a bacterial infection and possibly be able to determine which bacteria, is it a gram-negative, a gram-positive. That means we would be able to really embrace, solve this challenge. But the challenge is we are unable to do that rapidly. Culture and sensitivity takes, some good time before we can get the results. Then we need to have some new antibiotics and new technologies like I've already highlighted. We need worldwide control over antibiotics and their use, and then new modern technologies. So these are my recommendations from after reading through the part and understanding this concept of antimicrobial resistance and the challenges we are facing. These are my recommendations or call to action. We need more public engagement. We are already having public engagement through some awareness campaigns. We have the World Antimicrobial Awareness Week that happens from 18th to 24th, but we need more intensified awareness campaigns. Talk about radio talk shows, TV shows, talk about public dialogues, talk about education at health facilities whenever people come to seek health care, because these are settings where people will always come. The health facilities, the schools, the churches, among others. We need to really embrace these settings and provide proper awareness regarding antimicrobial resistance. And let's always highlight the catastrophic effects if we don't change our behavior. So that means we have to really work towards change of behavior and social norms and increase knowledge and understanding. What I mean by social norms is that some people think, oh, whenever I'm sick, I'm supposed to go to the doctor and ask for an antibiotic. I mean, we need to let people know that they shouldn't ask for antibiotics, but rather ask for any other alternatives if they are available. Then we need to intensify public programs like, that is public health programs like vaccinations, among others, because antimicrobial resistance right now is a public health concern. And if we do vaccinations, that means we will be able to prevent on the infection rates and hence reducing on the necessity for use of antimicrobials. We need to prevent infections in communities through improvement on good sanitation, clean water, proper food handling, among others, as well as infection prevention and control in hospitals. We are the future healthcare providers. We are the future people who are going to be in the hospitals. Actually, some of us are already in hospitals and we are managing patients. So let's always be very critical and key in preventing infections in hospitals. And COVID-19 has already made it very, very good because right now we are putting on our masks, we are washing hands, we are sanitizing. I think this is a culture that should persist or that should be with us even when COVID is done or even when COVID is gone. That is, if it will ever go. Still with the health workers, we need to really address the problems in an integrated manner. Give the effective antibiotics to those who need it in the right doses and at the right time with clear instructions on how to use them. Some people, after feeling fine, they just discard the rest of the medicines or they just share with the relatives. So we need to do a lot and we need to improve on access to health services as well as reduce use in antibiotics in animals. That is through the One Health approach, which Ajay was able to talk about. These more recommendations are mainly policy recommendations. They need more partnerships and collaborations between private and public sectors and global partnerships. One is more innovation for new diagnostics and new antibiotic classes. What I mean by classes is if you give me a new antibiotic that is under cephalosporins, and yet we are already having resistance to cephalosporins, it might not be really a good innovation because possibly we shall have a resistance to antibiotic as well. We need to strengthen more stakeholder engagement and implementation of national action plans. They shouldn't just remain in books on paper. Let these national action plans be put into action and let the monitoring and evaluation be done on what has been done as far as implementation is concerned. Improve on surveillance, monitoring, and evaluation. More collaboration between global scientists in basic and advanced research. We are the modern scientists right now. We can contribute a lot towards fighting antimicrobial resistance. So I encourage my friends to really embrace research. Personally, after joining this course, for the past few weeks, I've been trying to come up with ideas and I'm soon to write a research proposal. And I would like to collaborate with some people from this team. If you're willing, you can always hit me up after this session and we see how best we can do some research, which can really contribute something to the fight. And then we need to discover new alternatives, like I've already highlighted before, and more partnerships to enhance investments and financing. And something I've highlighted in Buru, financing of young people championing the awareness and projects on antimicrobial resistance. You see, young people are energetic and they have a lot of vigor and energy. And if they are motivated, if they're given the finances they need for their activities to be really showcased and implemented, we could see a very big difference and a very big change. Because we, the young people, we can reach out to everyone. We are very innovative. And if really supported, we can be somewhere. And I thank React Africa and other stakeholders for this program because it has really empowered us and we are still learning more. So my key learning points, this is my second last slide. My key learning points from the part 4 were the following. One, antimicrobial resistance is a complex global problem We need international and multi-stakeholder involvement for us to come up with sustainable solutions. A number of global initiatives have been brought on board to tackle the challenge, but we need more to be done. And a number of countries have really committed to fight antimicrobial resistance. They have developed national action plans, and some of them are implementing them, but we need more really intensified implementation strategies. Fighting antimicrobial resistance is everyone's role, not only the government, not only the health workers, but even the sick person in the village. There are a number of challenges and loopholes that still do exist in addressing antimicrobial resistance that we need to fill. Increasing awareness, prevention of illness, as well as effective use of antibiotics are the way to go. We need to reduce the use of antibiotics in agriculture, and we need to further the funding, research, and innovation, as well as regulation of antimicrobial use to create a balance in the future. And lastly, if we don't act now, our medicine cabinet will be empty and we won't have any new antibiotics. We need to save lives. If we don't act now, our medicine cabinet will be empty and we won't have the antibiotics we need to save lives. That is a statement that was made by Tom Frieden, who was the 16th CDC director. Thank you very much for listening, and I wish you all the best of the weekend. Back to you, Julian.
Wow, wow, wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Rogers. You'll agree with me that this was an excellent presentation. Again, let's just give him a round of applause for a few seconds. Yeah, thumbs up for such a great presentation. Again, well noted. Starting from the challenges in low and middle income countries, you touched on the recommendations from the Interagency Coordination Group, which are part of that part 4 of the course. And for sure, I totally agree that this is everyone's problem. And we've been given a challenge to visualize what can happen 50 years from now. And it's something that we should think about and also leverage on COVID-19, IPC in the health facilities, etc. So we are a bit behind time, but we'll give the floor now to Ignatius. It looks like his internet has improved, it's better. So we'll try one last time so that we hear from him, who's going to be covering part 2 of the course before we wrap up. Ignatius, we try one last time.
Hello.
Hi, Ignatius.
Okay, you able to get me?
Yes.
Okay, I think we can just quickly go to our next slide so that I don't have the disturbances of networks again. Okay, good morning once again. So I'll quickly run you through my presentation on understanding antibiotic resistance. Okay, so quickly, I would want us to look at the basics about a bacteria. Are you able to get me?
Yes, loud and clear.
Yes,
Thanks.
it is clear now.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so I'll quickly run you through basics about the bacteria. So bacteria are tiny single-celled organisms that are few micrometers in size, and they can easily be seen under a microscope. So they usually form colonies that can be made of several hundreds of cells, and thus are visible to the eye when they're grown on agar plates. So bacteria can be broadly categorized into gram-positive and gram-negatives. So what really differentiates the gram-negatives and the gram-positive is the cell wall that they are made of. So their cell wall is made up of a molecule which is known as peptidoglycan. So the gram-positive bacteria, they've got a a much thicker cell wall as compared to that of the gram-negative bacteria. And because of their structure and the composition of this cell wall, it really influences which antibiotics can usually be used to target these bacteria. So there we have some examples of gram-negative bacteria. So we have Escherichia coli, which usually causes urinary tract infection. We have Salmonella, Campylobacter, which usually causes gastroenteritis, just to mention a few. And then for the gram-positive bacteria, we've got Streptococcus pneumoniae, which usually causes pneumonia and meningitis. We also have Staphylococcus aureus, which usually causes wound infection. So these bacteria, they've evolved during millions of years in order to survive these antibiotics. And most of these bacteria, they've really moved from being friendly and they've become pathogenic. Thus, they are causing most of the clinical infections that we encounter. Next slide, please. Thank you. So I would also want us to run us through basics about antibiotics. So antibiotics usually are drugs that are used to treat bacterial infections in humans and in animals. So they function by interfering with the essential process or structures in the bacterial cell wall. So this either kills the bacterium or slows down the bacterial growth. Most of these antibiotics are not active against viruses and should not be used for viral infections such as common colds, as most people tend to use them. However, antibiotics are truly life-saving medicines for patients that are suffering from bacterial infections such as pneumonia. So how do these bacteria usually, how do these antibiotics usually target the bacteria? So these antibiotics will target the cell walls that surround the bacterial cell wall, as we talked about in the previous slide. So they also target the machineries that synthesize the nucleic acids, DNA, and the RNA. They also target the machineries that synthesizes the proteins. So these targets, which antibiotics usually targets in bacterial cells, are actually absent or different in cells of humans and other mammals. So which means that antibiotics usually do not harm our cells, but are specific for these bacteria. Also, these antibiotics can be classified in different classes. E.g., we have the beta-lactam group. Okay, and so antibiotics can also further be categorized as narrow or broad spectrum in terms of their activities. So the narrow spectrum antibiotics are usually specific against certain groups, while the broad spectrum antibiotics they have a wide range of bacteria on which they act upon, which results in a more profound effect on a bacterial normal flora. Thank you. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is just an overview of the different classes of antibiotics that are there. Yes, so as we can see from the picture, though it's not very clear, but we have the beta-lactam, the aminoglycosides, we have the chloramphenicals, we have the glycopeptides, and so on and so forth. Next slide, please. Okay, so we'd also want to talk about antibiotic resistance. So we've talked about the antibiotics. We've also talked about the bacteria. Now we want to talk about antibiotic resistance. So resistance simply means that a specific antibiotic is not effective against a specific bacterium. So antibiotic resistance, as we know, is a natural phenomenon. However, the selection process for antibiotic resistance increased dramatically. So in the process of antibiotics, it is advantageous for bacteria bacteria to be antibiotic resistant, since they thereby can avoid the action of these substances and thus they continue to proliferate. So these bacteria, they've become resistant, as we know, we are saying it's a natural phenomenon. So as they revolve with time, they become resistant. But how do they become resistant? So bacteria become resistant to antibiotics via the following ways: through the alteration of the target site for antibiotic, through the production of enzymes that inactivate the antibiotic, through the alteration in the cell membranes, resulting in decreased permeability and thus decreased uptake of antibiotics, using active transportation of
It looks like we have lost Ignatius. Ignatius, can you hear? Yeah, it looks like his internet is not very stable this morning, but at least he had managed to shed light on the basics about bacteria, antibiotics, and now moving on to how resistance spreads. And so what I would say is, since we are going to share the slide, I think it's okay. We can, I think he was just left with one more slide. Yes, talking about the emergence and spread of antibiotic resistance. And I think then it goes on to the next slides of how antibiotic resistance spreads. I'm sure most of us have seen this slide from WHO. That's just showing. Ignatius, are you back?
Yes, please.
All right. I was just rounding off your presentation, but you can just take over and just conclude.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you very much. Okay, sure. So from the slides, we can see how the antibiotic resistance actually splits. So as the picture really demonstrates there. So as we can see, antibiotics is also being used in animal production. Then from there, it also comes back to us, and we see that these resistant bacteria are actually just moving around our environment. Yes, please. Next slide. Okay, so my call for action really is to, I think from the takeaway message of the course, I think there is need to raise more awareness on infection prevention and through advocacy on hygiene measures. I believe in as much as we are in this pandemic, in this COVID pandemic, in as much as we are advocating on how ways we can prevent the spread of the COVID virus and the like. So I believe if we can do the same with antibiotic resistance or antimicrobial resistance, I believe we can also fight antimicrobial resistance also in that manner. Yes. And so just a quote by John Robbins, which says, "The only impossible journey is the one you can never begin." Yes, thank you very much.
Wow, excellent presentation again from Dr. Ignatius there, and thank you so much for shedding light, telling us about the basics of bacteria, antibiotics, how antibiotic resistance develops, and also looking at how we can leverage on the current COVID-19 hygiene practices that are around. I'm sure IPC has improved in quite a number of facilities, even in the general public, because of the awareness of how COVID-19 is actually spreading. So thank you so much for this, and we should give him a round of applause as well. Thank you. I know we had issues with your internet, but at least we managed to go through the presentation, and it was a very well done and detailed one. So for this, I don't know, Daniel, whether we have any questions from the chat.
I haven't seen any questions so far. I hope I'm audible.
Yes, loud and clear.
Okay, yeah, I think my network is also misbehaving today. Yeah, so there was no question, just a lot of appreciation and wonderful comments. As I listened through the discussions, I was really impressed, you know, the amount of knowledge you have been able to amass, how much we have learned, and how much you're able to apply all this to you know, to our current setting. I was able to jot down a few things, and I would like to share with us more kind of to brainstorm and kind of show us why some of these things, they seem so obvious, but they don't happen. You know, it's very easy to raise awareness, but why doesn't it happen? The government needs to commit. Why? So I segmented them into 4 portions, and I'll start with Ajay's presentation. Ajay talked so much. She gave us a very wonderful presentation. And one of the aspects that she focused on was on raising awareness. If you check, there has been, I would say, an issue because how then do we raise this awareness to the community? And I would love, for me, I'll share just rhetorical questions as takeaway message. I would love you to go and think after, so that at least as you generate solutions, you also think about them. In raising awareness, we have the issue of framing the information. You know, I'll also share with us a report that was shared by Wellcome Trust, and there are ways that we need to, you know, frame the information so that one, it gains attention of the public, and not just gaining attention, and it also stimulates action. How do we do this? That's one question that I need you to ask. Maybe if you are engaging the youth, how then do we frame this information so that at least they respond positively, and not just maybe responding, appreciating that we have an issue, but then they see the need to, you know, take some action. Then I would say that as we do that, we also need to acknowledge that change of behavior is a process, and so many contextual factors influence it. And one of them, I would say, about human beings is the issue of urgency. You see, like COVID, you know, you can all relate with this. The first few days, there wasn't so much that was happening. There was so much that you know, happened the first few days because of that urgency. Seeing how the situation was in maybe Italy, how people are, you know, dying and everything, kind of created that urgency and that fear. So we tended to change our ways. But then here I would love to, you know, refer to our initial session that we had last week, part 1, on, you know, building a face for AMR. How do we do that? That's something that we need to go and think about. I'll also share something about antimicrobial stewardship. You know, antimicrobial stewardship, we focus mainly on, you know, rational use of antibiotics, especially among physicians and other healthcare providers. But then I would love us to look at it from the face of a physician. Here I'm a physician, I have a patient, and maybe I'm not supposed to prescribe an antibiotic or something, but then we have, let's say, our diagnostic facilities are quite poor. The turnaround times are quite prolonged. So if I am to wait for maybe the test or something, then this means that I will be exposing my patient to some risk. So how, you know, it's kind of a dilemma. So will I maybe expose the patient to prolonged risk or give them antibiotics? And these are things that we need maybe to think about as we frame how we will how even us as we now, as we graduate to healthcare professionals, how I'm sure most of us, will be the lead stewards in developing antimicrobial stewardship plans and everything. How then do we package this? How do we, create that balance? Yeah. And I saw a quote on the WhatsApp group, and this was on, the irrational use of antibiotics in animals. One of us shared, and the issue was about, it's kind of irrational, using the antibiotics as growth promoters, and also using antibiotics for prophylactic, for preventive use. And some of the reasons why we do that is because most farmers are not able, to provide good, sustainable, maybe habitation for their animals. And then how do we communicate this to the farmers? Not just the farmers, because even some are not aware. If you watched one of the videos that was embedded in the course, I'm sure you saw the video by FAO on Bangladesh, how even some of the farmers are not aware of. Someone is someone has unmuted. You can try to mute, please. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so I'm sure some of you watched the video by FAO, and it was showing us, some of these farmers, they don't know even that they don't know that it is wrong. But apart from that, I would like to put us into a scenario. I am a farmer, and I have maybe some limited land or something, and I'm using antibiotics as growth promoters, because at least I am assured that even if my farming systems are not well developed, then it is easy. I'm sure that I'll have some results. Now, when you go and educate such a farmer on maybe you should stop using, what alternatives do we give them? These are some, because if you come up with a good alternative, then it is most likely that this farmer will kind of take the alternative, and now instead of now using the antibiotics for prophylactic growth. Those are some things that I would love us to go and think about. So that was on Ajay. Ignatius' presentation, he shared so much about a very wonderful presentation. And about that, I would love us to think, the dilemma between broad spectrum and narrow spectrum, and here I would love us to, just as you had shared about antimicrobial stewardship, most of the reasons most physicians use broad spectrum is because they are not assured of the specific, maybe bacteria causing a certain infection. So using broad spectrum quite covers a lot. So for them, they look at it from that angle. But you also have, the negative implications and all. So, and some of them maybe use broad spectrum drugs because, maybe even the diagnostic systems that are used are faulty. I am sure most of you have seen, I've been to a healthcare facility where, the agar plates and everything, some of these things were already expired and everything. So most of them use it as a, just as a caution. Now, how then do we address this? And over now to Mandela's wonderful presentation too on, the economic burdens and everything, the issue of access and excess, very evident in our settings, there are people who cannot afford an antibiotics, but some of them still afford. And I think Mandela also shared on this, the different dilemmas that maybe influence some of the decisions we make, If you lower the price of antibiotics, then that means they'll be easily accessible, so they'll be prone to misuse. But then if you raise the prices, what happens? Some people want to be able to access. And there was something that was, and this what triggers us to think more about how then do we, which regulatory mechanisms do we have in place? I would say there's one that I've seen that is currently being developed in Kenya for the Pharmacy and Poisons Board, and that is that if you are first they have an inventory, you fill the inventory of your stock, the stock that you have on antibiotics, and then every time you prescribe an antibiotic, you're required to photocopy that prescription and file it. So that as the inspecting, they're able to tell this is the stock that you had and this is the prescription. And the reason I'm sharing this is because then this one will kind of create that balance, so that even when we lower the prices, we are assured that most of these antibiotics won't be easily available to the public, because we have these local mechanisms. So these are the things that we need to think about. And the other one I would share about is something on the last presentation, and this will be something, on technologies. Rogers shared something important, about use. I saw a point on use of nanotechnologies, and I kind of will have to focus on that. And he asked a very good question on where will we be 50 years from now. I'm sure some of you are enthusiasts of tech and everything, and we can see that we have quite a tremendous increase, in use of machine learning, use of artificial intelligence, deep learning and everything. And I would love to encourage some of us, these are things that we can also, bring into AMR and see how we can, kind of also utilize them to create some existing interventions. Currently, there's a treatment that is happening, a partnership between Google, a Google lab in London, and the neglected diseases, DNDi. They're trying to use artificial intelligence to treat a certain infection. I don't remember which particularly, but these are things that I would love, some of these things, they don't come from big institutions and everything. Let's look at Google. Google just started, from 2 students on anything. These are things that you can research on, maybe develop a good proposition, and maybe approach someone, and they kind of revolutionize the world. So as we think about that, let's also think about how we can, leverage on these new technologies that are coming up. And the last thing I would love to share also, I would love us to think about is the issue of poverty in Africa. And this is something that has been really resonating with me. And I would love to ask, are we that poor, or is it a mentality? I would love you to think about that. Are we really that poor, or is it a mentality? Or is it that we don't maybe use our resources appropriately? Yes, we are not as much as financially as empowered as the developed countries, but don't you think there are some loopholes that exist in our, in our systems, that if maybe like corruption and all that, that we kind of mended them, we'll be able to do some things. And I would love to refer you to the analogy of Thomas Sankara. I don't know how many have read about Thomas Sankara. Thomas Sankara was a president of, I think, was it Guinea-Bissau or something? And he did quite some revolutionary things within very few years, things that even other African presidents wouldn't, imagine that would be done. And this is because he was able to shift the mentality of some of the citizens of the country, and kind of see that maybe sometimes our mentality that we are not able to do something blinds us from doing something, So I'm sure time has moved quite fast, and the reason why I tried to pick up, some of these maybe situations is because I would love to, challenge us. Sometimes when you think about some of these, if you think at it from the angle that I've placed it, then you're able to also come up with a few ideas. Just something to go and think about. Yeah, so go think about it, and maybe one way or another you'll maybe come up with an intervention. So that's it from me. Yeah, and maybe over to you, Julian, if you have something else.
Yeah, thank you so much, Daniel, for those excellent reflections. And as we said at the beginning of this session, that would want us to utilize Slack much more. Daniel has just given us some challenges for each part of the course, part 1, part 2, part 3, part 4. So what we'll do now that we have come to the end of the session where we were actually focusing on this online course materials, Would be putting all the presentations, all discussions that are relevant on each part, including the challenges that Daniel has just shared. Those are going to be put on Slack, and we should take the conversation to continue in that, because we'll continue learning. And I'm sure you agree with me that that course has a lot of resources that you can actually be referring to now, even as you do your studies. I'm encouraged to hear even some students are looking at what research you can actually do together, what research can you collaborate on, etc. So let's take this conversation and continue. Let us all be very active also in Slack. And I think I mentioned the reason at the beginning that WhatsApp is also very good as the social platform to just share maybe informal communication. But when we are commenting on these discussions where we are looking at what we learned, what questions we have, etc., I think it would be good for us to also put them in the channel under the Slack, so that even months later from this, if you want to look at maybe, there was that discussion we once had, maybe when we were looking at whatever topic it was regarding the online course, you can be able to easily refer to it in the Slack channel because it will be filed well. So thank you so much. I can see we are a bit past time, but I would like to sincerely thank all the presenters for today. And I think you all agree with me. Even Daniel was monitoring the chat box, and he says that most people were actually acknowledging that these were excellent presentations. So well done. And these were really, really good reflections from all the four of you. And if you continue with such a spirit, I can see Africa. That's not, of course, the question that Daniel just shared on us, that we shouldn't have the mentality to say poverty. I think we are actually the richest continent in terms of natural resources, etc. So if we're to change our mindset, and of course, there are the governance issues, leadership issues that, of course, are just making everything very difficult for the continent. But with such young leaders coming in, I'm sure we will make a difference and make a change. We can just take as our tradition, we can take as whatever photo, a group photo now. So if you can switch on your cameras, if you don't mind, for a few sections, because these will be used, because we intend to have a very comprehensive report at the end of the session, including all the presenters that have done for all the sessions and all. So the group photos are also useful, as we will also use them for that reporting as well. And final comment that I can give is thank you so much. There was actually overwhelming response for volunteering to present for this session, as I mentioned at the beginning. So thanks for that. And there are going to be much more opportunities for doing presentations or other activities. So just be on the lookout for those as well. And next, the next two sessions we'll have, I mentioned in the beginning, but some of us joined late. Next week, same time, we'll talk about national action plans. Most of our presenters actually touched on the global action plan and also the national action plans that have been put up by countries. So we'll have a discussion on the background to coming up with these action plans. What are the current challenges? What can we do? Because most of them are just on paper, but implementation is really yet to happen. So we'll have presentations on the national action plans. So make sure you attend next Saturday, and it will be an interesting session. The next one will also focus on One Health. So let's go on to switch on our cameras so that we can, those who don't mind, so that we can just take some screenshots. We are actually quite a number, so we'll have to take all the different screens for the different participants. Just a minute. All right, yeah, done. So
Julian?
yes, Daniel.
Yeah, I think I forgot something. Also, as we finish, we'll have to, have a reflection from each of you. At least we had, how much you've been able to listen from our doctors today. I'm sure we'll also, get an overwhelming response from you all. So we'll share more about that. We'll have just a short reflection on how your experience was in the course, or as you are pursuing the course and everything. But we'll share a small write-up on that. Also, as we prepare for for next week, I had maybe someone, I think one of the presenters shared that he was able to access one of the national action plans in the WhatsApp group. If you visit the Slack channel, although I'll also share them in the WhatsApp forum, you go to the channel of National Action Plans. We have quite a couple of National Action Plans document there. So please feel free to, go to that channel, the National Action Plans channel. You'll find quite a couple, month 2, part 1. Yeah, we have month 2, part 1. Yeah, we have quite a number of national action plans there. Yeah, so you can, be kind of going through them, acquainting as we prepare for the session. Yeah, so thank you so much. And well, we are really going far. And as I said, as I challenged us, I think we are the ones who, we need to change the narrative. We need to change Africa in terms of AMR and other leadership. Yeah. So thank you so much and have a wonderful weekend. See you next week. Thank you.
Thank you so
Over to you,
much.
Julian.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for that reminder. And indeed, I've just shared the screen for Slack just so that we are sure that we all know how to. I've seen some are active on the Slack channel, but others not so much. So I think it's good to just visit it and just go through. If you see here where I'm pointing, where there are the different channels, if you go through that, you'll be able to see, like for the animal health here, you can see, I think the presentation we had during the launch, for if you'd want to go back and see what OIE shared on the day, you can go back to that. And then the general one is the main channel where we just share the updates, the program. Daniel shared the revised version of the program just last week, so you can want to go and just see what's going on there. I just thought, let me do this so that at least we are aware. And he talked about the national action plans, which we do have quite a number for different countries. So in preparation for the session, as Daniel has said, you can go look at these national action plans and just customize yourself with them. So mine is just to say thank you so much for the wonderful session. And again, thanks to our excellent presenters for today. Thank you and enjoy the rest of your weekend. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Bye. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And let's not stop
Thank
the
you very much. God bless
conversation.
you all.
Let's take the conversation on. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Julian. Bye.